We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
To those who gave so much, we thank you.
Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight, Tuesday, the 8th of May. We may allow ourselves a brief period of rejoicing. Today is Victory in Europe's Day. Tomorrow will also be Victory in Europe's
What
Day.
a great speech. That was really, really good, but I think it was from quite a long time ago.
It was a really long time ago, Mrs. Meredith, because that speech was made in 1945. It was on May the 8th, and it was to mark VE Day.
Oh, I'm not sure that we all know about VE Day.
Oh, well, VE Day stands for Victory in Europe, and that is when the World War II was officially over in Europe, but it wasn't over completely until August 1945, when there was victory in Japan. And World War II was a really sad time for people, so especially children. And you know, in his speech, Winston Churchill does say that you can pause to rejoice, but we must remember that the war is still going on.
I think we've got a story about children that were evacuated during the war.
I think you're right.
London's burning, fetch the engines, fire, 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 pour on water, pour on water.
Every evening, soon after dark, the warning sirens wailed. Then came the awful droning of enemy aircraft overhead, and firebombs and explosives whined and whistled out of the sky.
Lenny and his mum huddled together under the stairs. Lenny clutched the badge that his dad had given him before he went away. It was made of solid brass, a lion and a unicorn up on their hind legs, fighting each other. Lenny kept it in his pocket, always where he could feel it. Dad was fighting too. He was in the army far away, while Lenny and Mum clung to one another and longed for daylight. A unicorn was a mythical beast, Dad had told him. A mysterious, gentle creature. But lions were real, all right.
Lions stood for being brave. Everybody had to be brave in wartime. Not only soldiers, but other people too. Children even. Be a brave boy, Lenny, Dad had told him when they said goodbye. Sometimes they got letters from Dad. They came in batches, 2 or 3 at a time. Those were the best days. Mum read bits out to Lenny while he was having his tea, and Dad always put in a drawing for him. Sometimes it was a funny picture, like the one of Sergeant. Once he did a beautiful picture of a unicorn with flowers around his neck.
One night, the bang shook the house so badly they thought the roof would fall in. We should have gone to the shelter, muttered Mum. Next morning when they went out, the Robinsons' house wasn't there anymore. Their things were lying all over the street amongst the rubble and broken glass. The neighbours said the Robinsons had gone to the rest centre in the night wearing blankets. That's it, said Mum. We've got to get you out of here, Lenny.
Soon, suitcase packed and his name on a label pinned to his jacket, clutching his precious badge in his pocket, Lenny joined a crowd of other children at the railway station. Mum was there to see him off. Lenny felt the shape of a lion with his fingertips. He knew he was supposed to be brave, but when he saw so many strange faces, he didn't know how to be. It'll be a lovely place in the country, Mum told him. Flowers and rabbits and that. But she was nearly crying.
Lenny only realised what was really happening when he was in a crowded railway carriage. He put his head out of the window and shouted, "Don't leave me, Mum, you come with me." But the train had already started to move, very slowly at first, then fast, gaining speed. "I'll come to see you soon," called Mum. Be a good boy. She was a white face amongst all the others. She shouted something else, but Lenny couldn't hear her. Then she was a tiny figure at the end of the platform, waving and waving.
It was so dark when at last Lenny arrived that he could not see the place. The windows were blacked out, then all at once he was in a large hall, so big that it seemed their whole house in London could have fitted into it easily. There were no rabbits that Lenny could see, just some tired grown-ups bustling about, and two girls bigger than him who were called Joyce and Patsy, with a little one called Winnie. They were evacuees. Lenny was one too. A lady wearing a great many scarves and woolly cardigans said, "I am Lady Devasse. You must be very tired. Nanny will give you your supper and show you where you are going to sleep." "We specially asked for girls," Nanny complained, eyeing Lenny. "I'm afraid it's too late now, Nanny," said Lady Devasse, "and he is not a very big boy," she added.
Evacuees were to sleep in a big attic room with dark beams overhead. It was chilly and had no electric lights or carpets, but there was a nice woody smell. A curtain hung down the middle. Joyce, Patsy and Winnie were together on one side and Lenny was alone on the other. Nanny left a couple of little lights burning when she said goodnight. Lenny got down under the blankets. He lay awake for a long time watching the shadows moving in the high roof. He could hear the girls whispering behind the curtain. Then Winnie began to cry. Lenny felt numb. The only thing that seemed real at that moment was the brass badge that Dad had given him underneath his pillow. He went to sleep clutching it.
On Monday morning, the evacuees started at the village school. The children were not friendly. They looked at Lenny blankly, as though he wasn't there. When the bell went for morning prayers, Lenny had to stay alone in the classroom, sitting at a desk. In the playground, Joyce, Patsy and Winnie went off together. Lenny was not included in the boys' football game. He stood by the wall until it was time to go home, clutching Dad's badge in his pocket and pretending he didn't care.
Lenny spent a lot of time wandering alone in the gardens when no one bothered him. One afternoon, when he pushed open the door of the walled garden, he found somebody else there. A young man with one leg was sitting on one of the stone benches. He was wearing an old tweed jacket with patched elbows. His empty trouser leg was pinned up and his crutches were popped neatly against the bench beside him. "Hello there," said the man. "It's all right, I do live here. I was just trying to do a bit of weeding." "Are you Bill Penny's helper?" Lenny asked. "Sort of," said the man. "I used to shoot rabbits and pigeons when they got into his vegetable garden, but I don't anymore. This is one of my favourite places." Lenny hovered by the gate, not sure what to say next. "My name's Mick," the man continued. "Don't let me having one leg bother you." "How did you lose it?" Lenny wanted to know. "I left it on a beach in France," the man told him, "but I'll be getting a new one soon." "Will it be wooden?" "No, light metal, I think, with joints." There was a friendly silence. Then Lenny remembered he was not to talk to strangers. He was not sure whether, as this man lived here, he counted as a stranger or not, but he thought he had better be on the safe side. "I've got to go now," he said. Mick just waved.
On wet days, Lenny sometimes followed Nellie about the house, and they chatted while they dusted and polished. In the great hall there was a suit of armour, swords hanging from the walls, and pictures of battle scenes with soldiers in red coats. There was a full-length portrait of a very grand officer in splendid uniform. "That's Lady Devasse's grandfather," said Nellie. "They've got lots of soldiers in their family. Lady Devasse's husband was killed in the First World War, and his son's a war hero. He's got medals and all. My dad's in the army," Lenny told her. "I'm joining up myself soon," said Nellie. "Women's Land Army."
Lenny longed for Mum to come, but she wrote to say that she would not visit until he'd settled down. She was working in a fireman's canteen. She wasn't a good writer, and her letters were short, but she saved up a sweet ration and sent Lenny a bar of chocolate now and again. Lenny saw Mick about the place sometimes, helping Bill Penny or Lady Devasse,
but he never came to the kitchen for his meals. "There's someone been killing rabbits in my vegetable garden," said Bill one afternoon when he was sucking his tea. "Not that I mind," he added. "I'm glad of it." A fox?" suggested Mrs. B. "No, it's never a fox. I like a big cat. Got some pigeons too." "It'll be one of those wildcats that's living in the barn," said Mrs. B. "Very fierce they are." "Or perhaps a lion escaped from the zoo," said Joyce, slyly, looking sideways at Lenny. "Lions kill people. They wait in the dark and spring out at you and tear your stomach out."
One afternoon, Mick came across Lenny sitting hunched on a bench in the walled garden and politely failed to notice his red-rimmed eyes. "Homesick?" he asked. At first, Lenny was too upset to answer. Then he blurted out what all the boys at school had said. "It's not even true anymore." "Well, hardly at all, but I don't suppose they'll ever stop saying it." "I used to wet the bed when I was your age," Mick told him. "It was when they sent me away to boarding school." "Had you done something wrong?" asked Lenny. "No, they thought it would do me good," said Mick. "My father went there, but it was awful. I got teased all the time. Then it started again in hospital after..." He looked down at where his leg had been. "But you were grown up then," said Lenny, amazed. "Yes, I cried a lot too, but I got through it somehow. And so will you, or my name's not Mick Devass." There was a long silence. Lenny stared at Mick. "You're the war hero," he said at last. "You've got medals for your bravery, Nellie told me."
"I was frightened all the time in the fighting," said Mick. "But I suppose you can't be brave if you're not frightened in the first place. My father was really brave, a fine officer. I'm only a private." "My dad's a private," said Lenny proudly. "He's fighting the Germans like you did. I've got his badge." "I never wanted to fight Germans or anyone else," Mick told him. "It's cruelty, bullying and oppression we're fighting." Lenny was not quite sure what this meant, but he got the general idea. "I used to come here to this garden to see the unicorn when I was a boy in the school holidays," said Mick. "I used to long to be brave and manly and all the things they wanted me to be. But there are different kinds of courage. And I'll tell you one thing. The boys who say those things to you haven't got much. None at all, in fact." Later, when he was alone, Lenny thought a lot about what Mick had said. Gradually, the bedwetting stopped altogether. Knowing a real war hero who had had the same problem helped. He even forgot about the prowling lions. But then something happened, which was much worse.
Mum's weekly letters stopped coming. Every morning, Lenny waited anxiously by the gates for the postman to arrive, but there was nothing for him. He told nobody how worried he was, but he started to have bad dreams about searching for Mum and running and lions leaping out at him and pinning him down with their terrible teeth and claws. The bedwetting started again. In the end, everything was just too terrible to be borne.
One night, Lenny waited till the girls were asleep. He had his suitcase ready packed. He put his precious badge in his pocket and crept downstairs to the back kitchen. It was difficult to unbolt the back door without making a noise, but he managed it, standing on a chair. He was running away. He had to get back to London.
He planned not to go by the main drive which went round the front of the house in case he was seen. Instead, he would cut through gardens, into the orchard, through a hole in the hedge, and across the field to the road. There was a bright moon. Lenny's sharp shadow tracked him nimbly along the silent paths. In the vegetable garden, he scampered past raspberry beds and rows of staked-up runner beans where anyone or anything could be hiding. When he reached the orchard, he broke into a run, weaving from one tree trunk to another, crouching low over his suitcase. When he reached the hedge, he stopped short.
He thought he heard something moving stealthily and carefully through the grass on the other side. He listened. The whole night seemed to be breathing, purring, growling. He was sure something was coming through the hole in the hedge. Lenny did not stop to find out. He dropped his suitcase and ran. Now the dark, many-chimneyed shapes of the house seemed to be flying swiftly against the moon, too far away to run to now. But he ran all the same, wildly, until he was heaving for breath. Now he was on the path to the summer house. He saw the door to the walled garden. He pushed it open, fell inside, and slammed it shut behind him.
Lenny was crying now, but he felt safe. The garden was completely quiet. The rosebush was frozen in the moonlight. Underneath, in its dense shadow, something glowed softly. It moved gently. Lenny wasn't frightened. He went towards it, and at that moment he saw the unicorn. It was alive, glimmering under the rosebush, sitting on its haunches with its one spiralling horn and its long, white, silky mane. It turned its beautiful neck and looked at him. Lenny knelt down. He laid his head between his hooves, with his face in the grass. He was very tired. Almost at once, he fell as though from a great height into a deep, deep sleep.
He woke with the hot sun on his neck. It was morning and the unicorn had gone. The statue was in its usual place, watching over the garden. Lenny got up and looked around. He knew that something had changed inside him. It seemed now that it was only his own night fears which had been chasing him. He went out of the garden, closing the door softly behind him, and began to walk back to the house.
The lion and the unicorn were back inside Lenny's head and on his badge. But one important thing was real, and that was what the unicorn stood for. Different kinds of courage, Mick had said. Now, after last night, Lenny thought he really knew what that meant. Perhaps with his new unicorn courage, he would try to stick things out for a bit and see if they got better. Anyway, he didn't seem to care much what Joyce and the rest of them said or did anymore. They were only a load of mean, angry old cats after all.
Lenny came to where the garden met the back drive. As he turned the bend, he saw a figure coming towards the house from the opposite direction. A smallish person in a brown coat. A familiar walk. There was a good distance between them. Lenny quickened his pace. Then he broke into a run. Now, as he got closer, the outline of that person was blurred with tears. Lenny tore the last few yards. "Mum! Oh, Mum!" he shouted, and he threw himself into her arms. "Didn't you get my letter?" said Mum after a while. "Bombed out. A direct hit. The whole house was gone. Lucky I was working at the canteen that night." "I never got no letter," sobbed Lenny. "The letterbox must have got it," said Mum. "I was running away," Lenny tried to tell her, but then his voice choked. It was too difficult to explain. "Lucky you didn't," said Mum, "or we might have missed each other. You're a brave boy, Lenny. A proper hero you are. After you left, it seems like even bombs would have been better than us being separated. But now I've come to take you away. We're going to your Auntie Rachel's in Wales. It's by the sea, Lenny. And guess what? Your dad's coming home on leave. We'd better go and tell them." Lenny felt in his pocket to check that his badge was safe. So he, Lenny Levi, was brave after all. He knew that didn't mean he would never be scared again. But at that moment, he felt he could face anything. Jaunty now, and hand in hand with Mum, he walked towards the house. To those who gave so much, we thank you.
We'll meet again